Bonne année. Welcome. This is our beginning of 2024 transmission of the gene keys. The wheel turns, and yet we are not in the beginning of the year according to the gene keys in human design. So we're kind of completing the end of 2023, and that actually feels right because we're coming up to a new moon in Capricorn. We've got a lot of Capricorn energy, but here is the big thing that's happening. The big thing that's happening is Pluto is changing signs. So you might want to take notes during this transmission because there's some things I'm going to ask and some things to contemplate. I was thinking about our sisterhood activation when we go into this next about should we do our New Year's, what's our word, all the things, getting ready. And I came up with no, not yet. There's still more to process before we get to that sense of being in the new. And I have a feeling that that's going to come when Pluto changes signs. Now, Pluto's very slow moving and it's an outer planet, not a personal planet. So we don't really, like astrologers say, we don't really feel it. And yet, if you've ever had Pluto transits in your chart, I totally feel it. Like they are destroyers of the old. And we've been in a huge destruction pattern of the old for the last 15 years. I was listening to Molly McCord, and she presents the time at 2008 to 2009. And so we're going to be looking at and just contemplating and holding the space for that time frame to see what is actually completing. But more than that, who have we become? Because that's what we're going to step into when Pluto goes into Aquarius. Now, for 2024, that's going to happen. I'm getting chills right now because I'm connecting the dots actually in real time right now. That happens January 20th, 21st. And that's about the time that human design and the gene keys says that we are going into the beginning of the year. So isn't that incredible? Last year, we had a new moon that initiated it. And this year, we won't have a new moon initiating that time, but we will have Pluto initiating that time. So we already had a dip. In 2023, we had a little bit of a dip of Pluto going into Aquarius, and then it retrograded back into Capricorn. So what's happening, if you think about it, is every sign has 30 degrees. And you can see that in your mind's eye, imagine Pluto hovering at the end of the degrees, and those degree signs at the very end and at the very beginning, like the 0 degree points, are super important. So you might have them in your chart, their endings and their beginnings. So we're already in the really important time zone where Pluto is at the end. And then January, and they're slow moving planets. So that's why it takes so long. We're talking about generational cycles, tectonic changes that change our culture forever. And so it's exciting to me. I love these contexts. Maybe I'm just being a good Sagittarian and I love these contexts, but I think it makes sense of why is it so intense in our own personal lives? Why are we breaking down in certain ways? Why are we confused? I mean, doesn't it make sense when you think about it? If we're changing in age, we're not really going to have visibility on this until later in the game. And we look back, sometimes people say for historians, that they need 20 years to actually understand something. I think we're going faster than that, but we're going to need some time to then look back and say, whoa, when I was in my 40s or 50s or 60s or whatever your age you're in, that happened. I was there. I didn't know what it meant, but I was taking on this spirituality or that spirituality or this distinction. I was like this and now I'm like this. And it really set me up for a totally different future, and it set the world up for a totally different future. So in 2024, Pluto actually does do another retrograde, I think in September, and then fully, I like, don't quote me on this, but I think it's November, fully goes into Aquarius. So we have a little back and forth, but we have more time than we've ever had of Pluto in Aquarius. So you might not want to know, you might want to know, where is Pluto in Aquarius in your chart? Where is it transiting in your chart? And we all have those signs in our chart, even if we don't have planets that are in them. So where's Pluto? Where's Aquarius inside of your personal chart? It's in my house of career. So Pluto actually, what it does is excavates the bottom so that you can rise. So I'm expecting really great things. I'm excited for it. And I know that Pluto is messy and chaotic. And we've seen that through the structures that are being torn down in our society today. So let me present a couple things that are happening in this moment. And that is that the Sun, Mars, and Pluto are in Capricorn. Mercury is late degrees Sagittarius, but it's squaring Neptune. So what does this mean for us? First of all, it means that there's a bunch of energy in Capricorn happening. And Capricorn is the sea goat. It actually is, I love this, because we always say it's the goat. It wants to climb the mountain and get to 6. Yes. But yes, it's also an earth sign, but it has a water element to it, which I really love for Capricorn. So we want to ask some questions. If we go back to that 2008-9 period and we look at all what we've been up to now, we want to ask ourselves, how far have you come? How far have we come? And really, what is our soul mission? What is our soul mission? And how has the signature quality of your mission? And I love that expression. That was from Molly McCord, because there's a way in which we've had to let go of so much and choose something. You know, I relate to that deeply because I love a lot of different things. But this Capricorn energy has been asking to choose, to focus. What are you really standing for? What are you really willing to go to the mountaintop for? And we don't wake up with that answer. I mean, this is the fun part. We're on a treasure hunt as human beings, and we have to hunt for our own treasure. And she also used this term energetic authority. I'm going to use this because I love it. I believe that is, when Claire and I were talking about what does it mean to be an evolutionary feminine leader, Claire, who's on this call right now, said to me, it's really standing and owning your own authority. And I love that because that gives you personal power to affect change. So this period is a reflection period of what is your energetic authority? Where are you willing to influence others? And as Namisha said before the call, that really you went through this wormhole about being visible. And that's so many divine feminine women. We just had a witch wound call last week with Claire Dash and healing and transforming trauma. That witch wound is alive and well, but the good news is that it's coming to the surface. I had a yoga teacher who was so powerful. She was seriously like Kali Ma yoga and Sophia Diaz. And she used to say, if it's coming to the surface, it's coming out. You can't heal anything that you can't see. And so this witch wound is so coming to the surface, and our willingness to be visible is one of the themes that we're seeing, that we're reclaiming as the feminine. One of the questions too is that Capricorn rules contracts. So what agreements have you had that you have to that you've had to uncreate, unagree to? Cancel the contract, complete the contract, come to the end of the contract. It also rules public titles, marital titles. So who do you say you are? This is the time for claiming, that energetic signature translates. And I'm going to use Claire as an example again. Inside of our leadership, she was like, I am a healer. So we have a person who is trained in psychotherapy and mental health, really declaring that I'm a healer. That's not something that was possible inside, like working for medical institutions that really aren't invested in healing. They're invested in people being sick, and we have to manage them. But what about full transformation? What about healing? So Claire found her inner authority as a healer. So for you, what is that? What title are you willing to call yourself? We call that inside the Evolving Sisters Network, what is your stand? And how has that changed? If we look at that 15-year cycle, how has that completed and changed who you used to be? I often use the words a lot about consumer and investor. So I challenge our community to leave the old title of consumption and really take on a new title of investor. How are you going to invest in your life? Even the food you eat, the messages you consume, where you put your attention. So chances are this last 15 years has really refined you, and you are on your soul mission. You are on your trajectory. And if you feel like, no, I'm not, don't worry, because you're being done. You didn't decide to do this and take it on. It's just what's happening. So you can just trust that you keep doing the work. And trust is a huge word right now, because when we are in a change of an age, when nothing in the future looks like anything in the past, and when we try to employ past techniques and they don't work or they feel yucky, then we're really in the unknown. We've got to let the new come through. And that's going to be a huge theme that we're going to take on in the coming weeks, because I believe that term that I keep seeing for myself, like, what am I a stand for? I'm a stand for evolutionary feminine leadership. That's where I'm going with the women, you all inside of the Evolving Sisters Network. We know we have to heal. We know we get to empower ourselves. We know we want to free our voice. We know we want to be visible, but for what? Because we're here to lead. And how does that look? It doesn't look like top-down leadership, because the feminine leads through her own embodiment, through her own radiance. And yes, sometimes she's at the table making deals. And we want that for our world. No more do we want the patriarchy sitting around tables making deals. I mean, I remember when we were looking at affordable healthcare in this country. I mean, years ago, like 10 years ago, it feels like time has flown by. But there was like pictures floating around of discussions around affordable healthcare with old, white, mostly bald men. I mean, they're not bad people, maybe. I don't know. I don't know them. I'm not judging that. What I am judging is what the F? Like, seriously, affordable care doesn't affect any of them. What do they care? So we now see, like, Capricorn gets to destroy that. Aquarian rule is way more grassroots and decentralized. So that's interesting, because there's grabs for power. And Pam Gregory says, no matter how much it looks like we're centralizing. The movement in Aquarius is decentralizing. I find that really interesting. So maybe they're going to be nation states again, our own ways of governing again, like, but in a new way. Like the old gets transformed to the new, because we're not going backward. It's spiral. We're taking what works and we're moving it forward. And that gets to happen through each of you. And so that's what I'm on fire about, because I see how we're going to get to the new is through every single person actualizing their soul mission. And that's what really the last 15 years has been about. So there are areas of yourself that you had to accept to get here. You know, it's intense. And there are areas of yourself you had to accept. And the Gene Keys supported us in doing that. Thank you, Gene Keys. Thank you, Richard Rudd. Thank you, Transmission, that came through, so that we can learn to really embrace the shadow. So Sun, Mars, Pluto, Capricorn are in Capricorn, new moon, Capricorn. We have a lot of Capricorn energy that's saying, all right, let's get some structures going. Let's really be on our soul mission. Let's support our evolution in ways like practices, habits, so that the structure can hold us. It can ground us as we move into like high levels of fire and air energy. So where are we going to find our grounding? Capricorn right now is it's like gracious. We've got this energy to ground. So what do you want to do with it before we like take off and fly? Now, I really felt it was interesting to presence the Mercury late degrees Sag squaring Neptune. That's really happening direct on Monday. So we have this kind of mental exhaustion, fatigue, overwhelm, confusion. And I wanted to presence it because I've been going through it, and I'm trying to like figure it out. And then when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, like just let it do its thing. It's going to come to a revelation. We also have the Sun in Capricorn squaring Chiron in Aries. Chiron, the wounded healer. That is, you know, everybody has their different takes. And I appreciate the take that presence that is like, we are really on a healing journey to give ourselves the deepest level of self-acceptance, a hug, and to also let ourselves know that we can handle it. You got this. You know, that 15 years, it's like, you know, you showed yourself you can do it. And so whatever comes, you now know that you have the capacity. And to let it just be, it's going to be messy. It's going to challenge our perfectionism. It's going to challenge our need to get it right so that we won't be criticized, and all the things that we have, like these like elaborate defense mechanisms that we just get to keep checking in. Is that true? Is that true? Is that true? And we'll just start to let them go. So that brings us to a transmission, and I'll be brief on it, although, you know, Gene Key 54 is epic. So here we are in the frequency of 54. It's a powerhouse. So the programming partner is the opposite. The opposite is those born in the July, first part of July, and that is Gene Key 53. So if you take 54 and 53, they're in the ring of seeking, and they're very masculine drivers. They are like achieve, make it happen. So it goes along with this powerful Capricorn energy that really wants achievement. And wherever you have Capricorn in your chart, that's the area that you really want achievement. And if you have conjunctions or oppositions, it's going to share with you more granularly in your chart about the nature of that achievement. So Gene Key 54 is the shadow of greed, the gift of aspiration, and the city of ascension. I love this gene key. This is like the Yogananda gene key. If you ever wanted to know, like if we create an archetype, this is the Yogananda gene key. And Yogananda created Kriya Yoga. So isn't that interesting? That's why it's the city ascension, ascending in the body. And Richard Rudd has a few things to say that I think are important as questions to hold. So greed. Greed is in all of us. It's the primal force to stay alive. And so we're not, just like vanity, we're not going to get rid of these shadow. We're going to use them as fuel. So this greed, we've already seen how it plays out. I don't need to say any of those things because you already know. The question is, how does greed live in your own life? Now, greed can show up in two ways because this gene key is literally about spirituality on earth. It's about both materiality and spirituality. It's about manifesting abundance. It's about having stuff, but it's also about transcending having stuff. Because if we stop there, then it's just a hungry ghost that you have to fill more and more. Have you noticed people who have goals to have certain things, they get them, the goal's over, then they lose meaning. That's the insidious nature of greed. Greed also happens spiritually. And that's what Richard Rudd says is really the reason why it's called the ring of seeking. We're seeking because we're greedy, and that's not bad. So it's just something to own, because I think that whenever, we know that we have shadows, if we don't own them, then they end up going sideways in our life, and we don't really harness the full power of the energy that's inside the shadow. So aspiration is, we can also say it's another word for ambition, but it's ambition cleaned up. It's ambition with a purpose. It's ambition with a spiritual mission. And in this gene key, it's conscious commerce. This is the birth of conscious commerce. Like, let's do things for the planet, 1% for the planet. Or the work of Patagonia and Yvon Chouinard and just the epic CEO leadership of Patagonia in doing things that the industry has never done, and transparency. That's Gene Key 54, the gift frequency at its highest expression. Badassery, taking a stand in 3D. So let's see if there's anything. The question for Gene Key 54 is, how can I serve life? That's a beautiful question. Let's just say a prayer right now for all of humanity. The humanity leaders, CEOs at all levels of companies will start asking the question, how can I serve life? Let's beam that question out into the world. And let's live it. Let's live the answer to that question. So you're here, Capricorn says, you are here to master the spiritual plane. And you're here to master the material plane. So Saturn in Pisces, just helping us do that exact thing. Ground our spirituality, make it practical, make it real, live it. Richard Rudd presences that there are many paths to ascension, to awakening. and that not every path is for every person. And I think that's important to note because we have a lot of pressure to ascend if you're in a spiritual realm. And let's do it this way. Let's do Kundalini yoga. Let's do meditation. No, no, no. This way is better. And let's presence again that we each have our own unique genetic makeup. And that's what the gene keys is trying to reflect. So it's good to contemplate it, because are you really one who goes on a masculine path? That's 53, 54. It's very yang. Yoga is masculine. It's like, I'm going to do this shit in order to get enlightened. I'm going to do something. Gene key 52 and 58 inside of the ring of seeking are yin paths. They're more like watching, sitting, allowing. I'm laughing at that because I have the second line of gene key 54 in my attractor field. It's part of the Venus sequence. And line 2 is known for activity and doing. So like the yin path is not my path. That would be like torture for me. But here's the cool thing, that the masculine path of gene key 54 ultimately, and this, like, isn't this true for all paths? Like ultimately becomes yin. Like, what are we here to do but rest in the arms of the Great Mother? So like, I just want to do it with a lot of activity. Others maybe like, you can have your activity. I'm just going to be with the flow of the universe. Right? Awesome. Do it. And then gene key 50 and 39, also in the ring of seeking, he says those are like love, service, the non-dual approach, more Zen-like. And in Hinduism, there are different paths to enlightenment, like karma yoga, like moksha. Like there's just pathways to your enlightenment, and each person is different. And in fact, if you run your Vedic chart, they'll tell you what path it is. So we're here to be both mystical and mundane. That's what gene key 54 says. I'm going to talk just for a minute about the city, and then we'll wrap up and get into our sisterhood activation. And I feel like it's important to say this because there are a lot of opinions about ascension, and we use that word. I use that word. Pam Gregory said that this is the first time that humanity gets to ascend in a body. Richard Rudd might say, I don't think so. Some people will, not everyone. I don't know. Like, this is what we're here to be the great experimenters of. And I certainly believe that our spiritual knowledge gets to be integrated into our bodies. So how does that look as far as ascension? Richard Rudd presences that, you know what? It has to be earned. It really takes oftentimes even lifetimes of very intense effort. Now that may sound too Catholic or too puritanical for some people, but let's just remember that nothing is 100% false. It's just the extreme of something that excludes the other that makes it false. So just like the patriarchy, what's made the patriarchy false, in my mind, is that it excludes the feminine. But we're not saying that we want to swing on the other side and have a purely feminine way of being. Like we've built too much for that, but we get to integrate it. And so it's yes, that we're really not in control. Our higher self is in control, and we're here in a body. And how are we spending our time, and how are we spending our attention, our intention? And if we really want to ascend in this experience, then we've got to stick our drishti on it. And then we've got to make actions toward it, carving out space and time. It's like sadhana. I mean, what Richard Rudd says, I think, is well taken, that we have to alchemize all of not only our shit, but the whole collective, because karma is actually collective. So when you're doing your shadow work, you're actually participating in the work of ascension. I just walked the labyrinth this morning. We've got one in my neighborhood. So I just go walk it. And I use that entry point as this time to look at the things that I may not want to look at, the things that I'm projecting onto other people. What's bothering me about someone else has something over here to own. To me, that's shadow work, and that's the path of ascension. So 54, and I didn't know this until I listened to his transmission, but it's worth saying here. 54 in the I Ching, line 4, is known as the sin eater. I love that. And he said it contains the mysticism of the whole gene keys. And we've said this before, and I love saying it this way to point to the same truth that we've said, is that you have to descend in order to ascend. You have to go into your shit and clear it, purify it, alchemize it. And this is the meaning of 54. 54 is like, yeah, you're not going to get rid of your greed, but you're going to use it for higher purposes, your ambition, your life force energy. And you're going to use it for spiritual growth. And so we're always walking that razor's edge, aren't we? Of when the ego takes over and we become this puffed up spiritual leader that the universe has to whack down. Or we can always stay on that razor's edge, using that energy, that drive to know more, to be God in flesh, and alchemize that energy. So yeah, the sin eater descends to the lowest before ascension. And that's really, when we think about Kundalini activations, it's interesting that it starts in this navel point, but it goes down before it goes up, and then it comes back down. So I never connected that dot when I was teaching Kundalini, that, oh my God, that totally aligns with the descent into our shadow, into the womb space, into the unconscious, before we can rise through our crown. So let's see if there's anything else. I think the message of 54 at the city level is no shortcuts. That was a good one for me to hear, because my defined root likes things done, and they like them done now. And Gene Key 54 is like, listen, babe, this could take lifetimes. So just be committed. Be committed and enjoy the ride of spirit in flesh. And it's a purification. And I think this ties back into leaving this Capricorn field and moving into a whole new energy. It's really the energy on the highest frequency of purification. Where have we really been purified? In our thinking, in our emotions, in our beliefs, so that we can take on something entirely new. And if we compare what we think about the future from a Capricornian, old world, let's say like we need to mark time like BC and AD needs to happen like right now. So before in Capricorn, when Pluto was in Capricorn, and then Capricorn in Aquarius, that kind of works, right? C is Capricorn, A is Aquarius. So here we have this demarcation. It would be like people BC telling people who live in AD what's possible. Like, it's really not possible to communicate without talking to someone in person or in a writing tablet. It's just not. We now know that that's not true. So let's hold some space for that change happening right here and now, that the future of humanity, we really don't know what's possible because we've never lived this cycle. And so the new gets to come through us, and it's going to be granular on every single human being. It's going to be granular. the new coming through. You're really going to mourn the loss or thankfully get rid of the old way of doing something and be a pioneer on something totally new. I'm excited for that. I also recognize that we got to do a lot of nervous system work, and that's where Claire Dash comes in transforming trauma, because our nervous systems, holy shit, they don't like change. You know, we've worked it out. We're in our little worlds. We're okay. Just don't trigger me. Well, we get to have more resilience because we're going in for a wild ride. So let's rub our hands together as we alchemize this energy of the old, this Capricorn energy. Thank you so much for all the ways you've turned everything upside down and made us uncomfortable, but actually made us truer. And let's beam this out into the world. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts. Namaste.